We're doing our community inquiry project on Koreatown. Koreatown is centrally located right in the middle of Los Angeles. In our group, we started off by asking, what do we know about Koreatown? And inevitably, we all came up with the same answer. That's right. So it has a burgeoning nightlife scene, Korean barbecue, karaoke, you name it, Koreatown's got it. But Koreatown also has a few other things. Specifically, it's the most densely populated neighborhood in Los Angeles, number one, and is a development map from the CRA LA Community Redevelopment Agency, Los Angeles. This helps visualize how dense Koreatown is. All these brown areas represent high-density residential zoning. So these are apartment buildings, 5-story, 4-story, 3-story buildings with multiple units in them. It also turns out that Koreatown is not predominantly Korean. In fact, most of the residents are Latino, and it's pretty diversified ethnically. You can see the diversity reflected at the school, RFK, where most of our group members are teaching. Here are all the languages represented: English, Spanish, Zapoteca, Chinese, Mongolian, Punjabi, Hindi, Vietnamese, Tagalog. So RFK is interesting because it is located right across the street from a major development. This development is right here. RFK is right here. This development is 30 stories, 269 units. It is monstrous, and Eric Garcetti put his personal approval on it against the say-so of his. So we go to this next slide, and here we go. We have to ask about the Environmental Impact Report, the EIR. Now, Garcetti approved this against the say-so of his own appointees, advisors on development and housing, and it's a little controversial because right before he approved it, the developer gave the city $1 million and $250,000, and it came with zoning exemptions. So Garcetti had to give this developer zoning exemptions to get this thing approved. And the residents of the community are not happy. They signed a petition. Lisa Fu, a Koreatown resident, has gotten 1,200 supporters so far. A lot of them are from the UCLA Community School, RFK, teachers, students, and residents. And it just so happens that this development had its EIR approved before UCLA Community School was built. So the Environmental Impact Report does not take into consideration the 4,000 plus students that pass by this planned development on a daily basis. So we'll see what the future has in store.
In one of our ethnographic interviews, we sat down with Professor Edward Park, who started off with a quote in regards to housing rights activists. He said, "They're bringing a knife to a war with missiles." The implication of this quote is simply that the housing rights activists, their activities in the past and currently, are only attacking the superficial issues and are not able to adequately address the structural problems around housing. In regards to Koreatown specifically, Park mentioned quite a bit about how Koreatown was increasingly becoming a node to transnational capital, simply meaning that more money from around the world was becoming invested in Koreatown. And so not hard to see when you consider the fact that Koreatown is the most dense population area in Los Angeles County. Now, much of what Professor Park said reminded us quite a bit of David Harvey. David Harvey is a geographer well known for his works on urbanization, particularly in the age of neoliberalism. And for Harvey, the construction of cities, and therefore also the housing market, is directly tied to the logic of capital accumulation. If we just take this little snippet from his book, Rebel Cities, he says, "What if we broaden that conception to think that it is the metropolis that now constitutes a vast majority a vast common produced by the collective labor expended on and in the city. The struggle for the right to the city is against the powers of capital that ruthlessly feed upon and extract rents from the common life that others have produced. This reminds us that the real problem lies with the private character of property rights and the power these rights confer to appropriate not only the labor, but also the collective products of others. Essentially, all Harvey's saying here is that the city is inherently a product in which all have contributed to the creation of. All the social values, all the cultural experiences, the daily life of the city is a product created by everyone. It is the commons. However, this common characteristic of the city, the fact that it's a social creation by all, is contradicted by the nature of private ownership, in which an individual or a group of individuals are able to utilize the products created by all for their own benefit. So in housing, this often resorts to where new developments, although they are advertised as attracting people, often the consequence is that they fence off access for people already living in the city. In our specific example at RFK, our school is located right about here, and directly right across the street from it is a new potential development. This is what the lot looks like today, and perhaps in a few years, this is what the lot may look like. And of course, it forces us to ask who's going to live there, who's not going to live there, who used to live there but doesn't live there anymore. This leads us to then thinking about more practical issues of which how can we contribute to the struggle for housing. And thankfully in Koreatown, it's a great asset of Koreatown is that there are many community organizations fighting for housing rights. In this specific here, we have a group called the LA Tenants Union, which is a recently formed grassroots organization that does much work around fighting evictions. Here we have the Koreatown Immigrants Workers Alliance that also deals much with housing, although of course they deal with a lot of other issues as well around the community. And there's a potentially new ballot measure being put on in LA that seeks to put a moratorium on mega projects that end up violating certain zoning codes. Regardless, given all these considerations, the structural problems, and the potential ways to address them, perhaps we should shift the paradigm on housing a little bit. If we think education's are right, if we think housing's are right, if we think healthcare's are right, we should refer back to the question David Harvey raised, which is who should have the right to the city? Should a city be simply a place for the accumulation of developers? Or should a city be a place in which the commons produced by everyone can also be enjoyed by everyone?